So, hi, Alex. I'm very happy
Hello.
to be talking to you. So, you are a Copper expert, Asana certified pro, Zapier certified pro. So, you know everything about automation, right?
Not everything, but I know some things. I know the things. Yeah.
Okay, so I do have two icebreakers questions for you. Are you ready?
Cool. Yeah, absolutely.
So, if you could automate anything in your life, what would it be? So, I have an example for me if you want. I'll start with my example.
Yeah, that'd be
Um,
great.
I would like to, when I'm finished reading a book, I would like to have my next book already in the mailbox based
Mm,
on everything I've read before, things I've been talking about to other people. Like I need something to read my mind and know what I want to read next and have it sent
mm.
to my house.
So machine learning, mind reading based on books and interests, and I like that. Cool. Okay, so you can kind of
Yeah,
keep it going, keep it going. Yeah,
exactly.
I probably something from the sense of making food in a way. So as long as like I'm fine with ordering ingredients or even going out and buying groceries, whatever else. But the problem is there's definitely days where I get so sucked into work or I'm working on a problem or you have back-to-back support tickets coming in that I totally forget to eat and I forget that I'm even hungry. So something that would more consistently either make food when I was hanging out at Copper headquarters a few months back, they had the meal delivery program going on. So essentially on Monday, you would go through and say what you want for food and you pick from certain restaurants. And then at 1 p.m., all of a sudden you get your meal there. And I'm just like, wow, like that's in a sense, I guess a service exists for it, but it's more for offices. So that type of service, but for the home maybe. So automate the
Okay.
process,
I, I
of
I was on
eating.
a yeah, I was on a call with a client once, and I was also on the call with this assistant, and the assistant was ordering food for the CEO, so was getting food during
Yeah.
the call, and she was doing everything.
Oh yeah. That sounds great. So I guess, yeah. So automating that, I guess you can get a personal assistant to also help with it as well. So there's that too.
Okay, so next question is, if you could automate anything in your business, what would it be? In my case, it would be to always have an address book, a contact book, always up to date with everything I've been saying
Ooh.
with the person on different channels, all inside the contact book with a picture of the person, all the links to social media and everything.
Yeah, it's a good one because content always or people's data always gets outdated. Yeah, so I would probably say something around aiding me in some of the context switching, the sales process. So I'm more of like working in the back end, working on the automation. So when we have like a new sales call come in, and then the whole sales process, I need to be involved in some way, right? Where it's like hearing what the needs are, seeing if it's something that we can do, and then consulting on that piece. So if there's something that allowed me to better automate the context switching, um, between that, I think that would be ideal. So I can kind of focus on that area. So it's funny when we're talking about automation, and a lot of this feels like it comes down to delegating. It's like delegating
Yeah,
to do
it
to a
does.
human, or
It
you could
does.
delegate to a computer. But computers aren't the best for more complex tasks, the odd tasks.
Yeah, but I guess
Uh,
you can delegate anything. So basically, it's automation with humans doing the work.
yes, yes, yeah,
Okay, so
exactly.
let's go back to real life. How are you using Zapier, and especially with Asana? Are you using Zapier, and how with Asana?
Yeah, so I'm quite heavily using Zapier. It's kind of at the core of a lot of what we do build. If we are thinking about building out a product, then we'll typically build out an MVP within Zapier or Integromat or some of the other tools out there. Zapier is typically kind of the largest used tool. There are a few quite robust automations that we've built with Asana using Zapier. And one of those, for example, is the help desk. So we use Help Scout. And
Okay.
the issue that we run into oftentimes is sometimes we're doing project-based work for clients. Sometimes when you're wearing all the hats in a company too, you're dealing with admin. So it's like needing to invoice certain clients or do something on a month-to-month basis. And then you have kind of alerts that are coming in for an automation that failed, a webhook or an API that went down. So you have all these different contexts and touch points. You have
Okay.
the support side of things, you have admin, and you have sales, and you have everything. So what we built out was a way for these support tickets and these alert tickets to come in and then push its way into Asana. So when I go into my day view, not only do I have the random projects that we need to do internally or the working projects that we have with clients, but I also have those support tickets as they're coming in and also the alerts as they're coming in. So you have the kind of single pane of glass being Asana. So I just know if Asana is cleared out for the day, because I even tell Asana I have a recurring task that says like triage email inbox. So I know like as long as Asana is cleared out for the day, the business is up to date, we're good, we're caught up, and I can kind of disconnect for that night.
Okay. And how often do you try to automate things? When do you tell a client you should automate this? It's taking too much time. What is the threshold to decide when to automate?
Yes. So I was just talking to my girlfriend Andra about this last night. I what I recommend versus what I do is totally different. So for me to like build out an automation, sometimes like I test a theory, like I've done this once and it's probably going to be something that I may do multiple times. And then that's where I may spend 20, 30 minutes into building an automation for it. So we can do it quick enough to then test it and realizing that a lot of this we're going to throw out. Whereas a client, it's like, if you've done it twice, then it's like keep an eye on it. And then if you do it a third time, a fourth time, fifth time, and then you start seeing it happen frequently enough, then that's a time to consider automating it. But realistically, think about how much time it takes each time to do it. So if it's something that takes you 3 minutes to do, so for example, we just closed a deal yesterday, and it's like there's a process involved with closing the deal, sending the invoice, doing these things. And if we're only really closing like 2 deals a month,
Yeah,
then does it
exactly.
really make that much sense to put that much time? Like, yes, we can automate some of the process of the invoice sending out and creating the customer in all these different areas. But it's like if it really takes 10, 15 minutes to do this process, then it doesn't make sense to automate it. So we've automated pieces of that, but we would never recommend to a client. If you're closing 2 deals a month, we really don't need to be automating the follow up or the next step process of onboarding. So it's really kind of a time differentiation. How much time can be saved by automating it and how frequently is this happening? How frequency and repeatability, recurring of that happening is a good sign of like we should start looking at this to see if the value of investing automation is worth how much time will be saved from it.
Yeah, exactly. I've been telling the same thing to clients. They wanted to automate some client project creation, but they do have like 3 or 4 new clients per month, and it takes like 5 minutes.
Mm.
So they wanted a template with a very special workflow, and I was like, but it takes you 5 minutes, 5 times a month, so it's really not worth it to build a script that's going to cost you like $1,000 just to save like an hour. So it doesn't make any sense.
Well, so in addition to that, we had a client recently with COVID hitting. Their processes have been turned upside down, and they were because they're an in-person business, and now they've shifted to be doing a lot of it like video calls and things like that. So we really automated their process when they were doing their physical services business. But now that they're doing it totally differently, we talked about it. It's like, should we be building out these automations? And they're like, well, hold on. We don't yet know if we're going to stick with these
Yeah,
is
exactly.
we were talking about Zoom fatigue and things like that. That it's like, yeah, great, we could build out like, oh, here's your Zoom link instead of meeting in person, we're meeting over Zoom. But then he started seeing that people were getting Zoom fatigue, and then it was just like, hold on, we're gonna do day to day and have our team be doing all these strength like these processes over and over and over, and then we'll decide maybe a month or two down the line if we should automate or if we should update our processes to automate it. So some of it too is it's being lean in a sense and being flexible and being able to change things around. My sales process is changing on a day-to-day basis. So I'm actually dealing with a lot of legacy automations that I've built, moving it to one stage in the sales process to the next. And it does certain things in the background. And I actually don't want that to happen anymore. So I'm realizing that all this time where I was putting in time into thinking I knew what my process was, my business has pivoted since then. And it's actually becoming more of an annoyance than it is a help. So sometimes it's that piece too, being nimble.
So would you say that people often get excited about automation, and then after a while, like you realize that it's not worth it most of the time, and you should do everything by hand because you know it's going to change?
So I think it's easy to get excited about automation to the point of automating every piece of the process and just know that like the best clients are clients that have just a refined process that they're doing and they've been doing it for the past 10 years. It's like this is consistent process. We can build out automations, we can tweak it, improve it, tweak it. Okay, now we're gonna do SMS outreach instead of email outreach. That just tweaks one piece of the process. But when you're a company that's early on and fragile and you're moving quick, it's like the process is changing just too much in order for you to even start getting into that. So I would just kind of say like play with automation, But I wouldn't look. So people think I'm going to be so productive. I'm going to automate our processes, and they're closing so few clients a month and everything like that. It's like, hold on. I think there's other things that you can do to really move the needle. And then once you have consistency, and now you want to start hiring employees and you want to start building out processes. Once you start having employees, that's where you can start dealing with processes, because you're typically
Yeah.
delegating a process to an employee. Then the next question becomes, can we make this employee be more efficient by taking these things off their plate by automating it? Because they've been doing the same thing for
Yeah,
two,
so
three, 4, 5 years.
basically you need to delegate first and then automate things people have
Yes.
been doing for a while because you know the process very well.
Oh
And
goodness. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
I've
Yeah.
been telling
Absolutely.
the same thing to clients about delegating. You need to do the process yourself quite a while before delegating to an assistant, for example, because you would realize what it takes to do the work and you can delegate in a more efficient way.
100%. Yeah.
Okay, so let's say now that your business is all built on Zapier. For example, I have two questions. How reliable is it? And how can you trust where your data is? Because basically Zapier holds credentials to everything you have in your company. So what if they have some data leak? You're screwed
Mhm.
because every single service you use would leak.
Yeah. Okay. So this is a tough one. I've played around with the thought quite a bit, from a cost savings aspect, building something out myself versus using something like Zapier and Tegromat. And realistically, Zapier is a company that is doing like over $100 million a year in revenue. So in terms of cybersecurity, security in general, my website's been hacked more times than I can imagine.
Yeah.
And it's just like, at the end of the day, am I going to go through and build out this really secure infrastructure that's going to be hosting client API keys, that's going to be having authentication, which, keeping in mind too, Zapier, a lot of the time it does too, it uses OAuth. And it's like, realistically, if there's some kind of data breach, there are ways that you could kind of just change your password in G Suite, for example. So data breach happens, change your password in G Suite, that's going to disconnect everything.
Okay.
To do a weird piece where it's actually kind of frustrating when a client changes their password and then that all of a sudden forces us to re-authenticate all these things on Zapier. So I think there's ways where it's like, it's more secure in certain ways than something that we would potentially build. But in the same token, the functionality that allows us to do is definitely worth, I guess, the potential risk of handing
Okay.
some of this stuff off and not having control over it.
Yeah. So it's worth it. And what about the reliability? You've been using Zapier for years now. Have you seen days where it just doesn't work?
100%. I mean, there, with anything, I think it's like, any software as a service out there is going to have like a 99.99% uptime, hopefully. But if you start running through the numbers and how much downtime you're going to have per month at that 99.99, which sounds great, it's going to be like 4 or 5 or more hours a month that you're pretty much saying, we're going to guarantee that there's some level of downtime. So that's like Zapier trying to stay up to date. And then you have all this other software. So you have Copper on there, you have Panadoc, you have all these other services, and they have their own quote unquote 99.99% uptime. So now it just kind of goes through this whole myriad thing. And like, your service level agreement ultimately comes down to whoever has the, like, so Copper can be down, which can affect Zapier. And then it's like, you need to go down this whole path. And ultimately, our service level agreement might have to be like 2 days, because realistically, Copper may be using some type of service that has an SLA agreement that happens to be down, and that's affecting their services. So it's like, it's not just Zapier being uptime. I think they're quite good and stable with that, but it ultimately comes down to the software that's being used and all the things that happen. So Asana just ran into a big issue the other day,
No.
that I noticed actually affected quite a few other services as well. Not like a focus attack or anything like that, but it was this moment where they were down for 5 or 6 hours, and there was some data that was lost for us with Copper. And at the end of the day, like, yeah, we had a couple clients that were upset, but at the end of the day, we were looking at it and it's like, it was out of our control. It's nothing that we can do. And the value, you just need to take a step back and be like, is the value of the automation outweighing that we may have some of these events that happen every now and then? This is the first time I think it's happened, to this extent in probably 2 or 3 years. So it's like, but it's quick for clients to jump in and be really upset when
Yeah.
something like this happens, because it is unacceptable. And then these are the moments that make me realize, where I take a step back and I'm like, how much we get reliant on automation, where if it goes down for, 5 hours in a working day, we can't function. And it's like, that shows how valuable it is in a sense. But
But
it's all,
I
I think,
think
yeah, yeah,
it's different when you have Asana down, because you are in Asana, you see it doesn't work. But when Zapier doesn't work, you don't like see it right away. You don't realize that things don't come in from the different parts. And I think that
yeah.
makes it a bit scary, because you don't realize you've missed things because Zapier was down.
100%. Yeah. And that's where um, Zapier tends to do a pretty good job about alerting you if there are kind
Okay.
of delayed webhooks and things like that. I think you go to status.zapier.com, and they're even doing things where they're monitoring the services atop them and like, hey, Panadoc has been, slow. It's been delayed quite a bit for the past like couple hours or whatever else. So they'll even do some level of reporting on that. But it's like worst case scenario, Zapier then typically has tools in place where, okay, it's delayed and then it runs through and then you
Yeah,
can
they
see the
replay
history.
everything.
Yeah, exactly. They'll go through, they'll triage through, they'll replay it. So then the worst thing ends up happening where a client thinks it's not working. So then they manually do it themselves. And then an hour later, the replay triggers because the delay went through and now they have a duplicate of whatever happened. So it's almost like a twofold thing. So I think the balance of letting clients know when an issue arises, sometimes you should run with it if you need it done immediately. And other times just wait. So most of the time it will play itself out. A lot of this comes back to, should we build something ourselves? And it's like, man, I just think there are all these delay functionalities, these replay functionalities, the historical tracking, the task logs, all of this. There's so much in there that Zapier has built so thoughtfully that for us to get any level of that reporting and logistics functionality, like that's a whole service on top of itself.
Okay, all right. So what is the craziest Zaps you've seen out there? Like the craziest clients that had a whole bunch of stuff connected to each other?
We've
Or
there's definitely
maybe
some
something really dumb, like two dumb apps connected to each other.
um I'm there's okay, this one of my favorite automations that has been built that's a little bit weird and strange is for we have a painting client and they're using Airtable to essentially up at the end of the day they fill out a form and it uploads so that their project lead will go through, they'll take pictures of the job and then they'll upload the photos to Airtable using the form and pretty much say, okay, start or today's time started at 3 a.m. or not 3, who goes and works at 3 a.m., 9 a.m. and it goes until 4 p.m. Tomorrow we're going to be coming in at 6:30 a.m. and then here are the pictures for the day and whatever else. So all this just gets pushed over from their job lead. So not really technical guys. These are laborers that are kind of on the field. And then at the end of the day, the team goes through and they check a box within Airtable, which you have trigger within Zapier and Integromat doing all these things. It goes through and it changes, condenses the sizes of the images, and then it creates an email and sends out a daily update email to the customer. So they just check
Nice.
like 5 boxes, and then the customer essentially gets pictures of their house, of people, the guys working on it throughout the day. And it pretty much says like, hey, here's what we completed today. We painted around the trim of the doors and whatever else. So there's a couple of options that they can select to the job leads where they're like, okay, we did this today and this today. So they just get this pre-formatted email that is very personalized and has pictures that they literally see. It's a bit kludgy. It's a bit weird, like the trigger being just a checkbox being clicked within Airtable. And we're using a third party Zapier connector to even make that work onto Air Actions. Like it's this third party thing that can allow you to do these weird triggering in an unlimited number of times. So it's super kludgy, but it works and it works well. And it's so cool when it does work.
And it's very cool because they've probably been sending emails manually for months or years, and then
Oh
you
yeah.
came in and automated everything.
And the thing too is they typically wouldn't be attaching like the job photos, like pictures of the job, because can you imagine a job crew leader taking pictures and then sending it over via what, text or
Yeah.
Dropbox or Google Drive, and then you need to find it, you need to pen them. It's just like there's too many steps to be able to do that. So now it's just like fill out this form and then check the box
Yeah. So
and beautiful.
basically, yeah, they are allowed to provide. Can you hear me again?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So they are able to offer that service because of automation. They wouldn't be able to do that otherwise.
Absolutely. I mean, they were doing some form of a daily check-in email, but it just wasn't as full featured and it wasn't as, I guess, personalized in that sense.
Okay. All right. Earlier you talked about some alternative to
Yeah.
Zapier. I've never heard of any.
Mm.
Who are they? Who are they? Where are they?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot coming up, especially lately, and they all try to kind of focus on their own pieces. So there's a few that I've used specifically. So there's Trade.io, there's Integromat, there's I don't want to mention the whole myriad of the random other ones, but they typically seem to focus on a niche. So Trade.io, for example, they're quite expensive at like I think starting at like $550 a month, and you get like 5 workflows, but
Whoa.
they give you like I think it's like 1 million actions per workflow, and it's really meant for more enterprise. So an example where we were using it for a legacy client is anytime they had a phone call on Ring Central, it would then go through and sync that call to the CRM. But the thing is, like, it pretty much does this whole looping thing. It works really well with looping, and then it stores its own database of has this call already been logged, and it will check on every 5 minutes to see if that happens. So it's doing a lot of weird internal stuff, whereas and it looping and repeating stuff and triggering constantly. Whereas Zapier is more like I want to push data from here to here. It's very one way. If you
Yeah.
try to do a loop within Zapier, it gets quite messy. So Trade.io does that quite well, but they really moved outside to be focused on enterprise, and it's just not cost effective, and the use cases for it just really don't make sense unless you're a large enterprise that is doing like one thing over and over and over a crazy amount of times where you can justify that. So I don't really use them anymore. But then Integromat is a good example where they deal with strings or arrays rather, array management and
Mhm.
looping. And for example, what I mentioned too, one of the problems we were running into with the client who was uploading the pictures of the job, these pictures on smartphones are sometimes like 8 MB, 10 MB for one picture. So all of a sudden we upload like 5 pictures and we're already over the 35 MB limit for sending out an email from Gmail.
Yeah.
So I tried a couple other mediums to do this, but ultimately I had to go to Integromat and able to loop through each picture and downscale it and then append that to the email. So things like that are handled a lot better in something like Integromat, but Zapier is really good for kind of just from a usability perspective. So Integromat looks great because there's like little bubbles that you can connect and disconnect, and you can move steps. So you can't move steps around within Zapier, but you can move them around in Integromat. Super useful. But the error messages in Integromat are a bit more like blunt, and you don't really realize when things are happening, and it allows for error handling, but it's confusing to deal with error handling, like having it replay if it gets this error, whereas Zapier sometimes will just give you an error and be like, hey, this didn't work any longer. So I find that even after using Zapier for probably 5 years now, I still run into difficulty going into Integromat, even though Integromat looks like it's an easier to use solution than Zapier.
Okay.
It's a really weird thing. So it's kind of, yeah, use the best tool for the job.
Okay, nice. Okay, so last question, would you have any tips or suggestion for someone who wants to start using automation with Asana, for example?
Yeah, well, I mean, so we didn't even talk about, I guess, the automation built inside of Asana, because like that's probably a good way to get you thinking in automation. So if you're on the professional or business tier of Asana, you get access to their kind of the automated actions aspect. So when you change a status, it could then change a column,
Yeah.
or change a column could change a status, and you could do these various different things. I would say play with that, because some of automation is really tough to understand. People say automation. When you hear automation, you sometimes think robots, you think all these different things, you don't really know what it is. But automation is very much like going back to like if this then that. Um, Really, when this happens, you want this and this to happen. So doing that with Asana's automated actions and playing around with it. Now just think of how you can have something happen in Asana to trigger outside of Asana. So that's the thing. So it's like change the status to pending. That could then trigger to move a column within Asana, and then also go to your CRM and update a row for a record saying that it's pending or something like that. Or say a more realistic example is your sales process typically leads into your project management process. So when you go from closing a deal to actually jumping into Asana and creating that deal and running with it and doing project management and then finishing up that project, then maybe going back to the CRM and marking that it's been completed. Because your sales team and product or production team, they're two different teams. And when you're a small business, you're kind of one and the same. But think of like, how do these systems need to talk to one another? So I say play with the kind of the restricted pieces within Asana and learn how automation works. Write down your day-to-day of like what you're doing. So when you're doing a repeatable process over and over and over, so something, for example, this is like when it gets to the delegation piece. I just finally hired a CPA to actually reconcile my books. I've been reconciling my own books on a monthly basis for the past 10 years. And I liked doing. I didn't mind it because I had a really good pulse on what was going on in the business. But ultimately, what I did for myself was I documented everything I had to do to reconcile my books, because every month would go by, I'd be out of like accounting mode and I would be doing project management and sales, now back into accounting. And I'm
Yeah.
like, I would just follow that process, and consistently that process would take me about an hour and a half to reconcile my books. And then I realized, getting a CPA, I just gave them all the documentation I built, and now they're following that. And then when they run into issues or I see that they make a mistake, sometimes it's due to a type of sync that's going on, that like it's like a client made a payment in this area when they should have done it in this area. Then I write a script in automation to say, okay, when this client pays, they typically pay by check, which is going to mess up the system because the system only looks at Stripe for payments. So then I alert myself and say, hey, I need to fix this. And then by the time the CPA goes in to reconcile the books, he doesn't run into any issues. So sometimes automation aids delegating. And then other times you want to delegate and then you realize what can be automated. And then other times too, it's like, I think I'm paying my CPA $100 a month. It would be far more work to automate
Yeah, definitely.
reconciling for $100 a month for a CPA that's going to be doing this and paying attention to my books, and it doesn't all fall on me too now. So I think it's a fine line between delegation and automation too.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so if anyone needs any help from you to connect Zapier and Asana, for example, where can they find you?
Yeah, well, so I mean, I'm in this really weird area where we're actually just working with companies that are using Copper, CRM, and G
Okay,
Suite.
so
So
they should go to me then.
exactly. Yeah, I would say go to you, check out the Asana community forums. But if you do want to check out, you can go to cyberbytesinc.com. And we're really building out some productized tools. So we will build a couple tools potentially that will integrate with Asana. So for
Okay.
example, this Help Scout Asana sync that we have, which has been really great. There is means to productize it, but there's so many weird moving parts that I think it would be tough to productize it in its current form. It's quite custom for me. But in the future, we're looking to build these little integration kind of connector as products and then kind of pushing them out, because it's more scalable versus doing that really highly consultative piece. So, but if anyone wants to just reach out in general, I'm always happy to talk. So there's that too.
Okay, cool. I put a link to your website in the video comment.
Awesome. Cool, man.
Thanks.
Hey, yeah, for sure. Thank you for your time.